Our next conversation is going to continue, talking about our farming systems with a focus on regenerating farms for vibrant communities. I get the pleasure of welcoming Chaz Daughtry, a farmer and the founder of Sweetwater Farms here in Texas, in Houston. He is also the founder of Soulfitgrill Seasonings. Give him a round of applause, please.
Thank you.
We also have my dear friend Michelle Hughes, the co-executive director for the National Young Farmers Coalition. Please give her a round of applause. I love this woman.
Hi.
Kelsey Scott is the Chief Strategy Officer for the Intertribal Agriculture Council, a rancher and a food system advocate. Give her a round of applause. And we have Josh Tranel, the farmer owner at Tranel Family Farm and a board member at Organic Valley. Welcome him, please.
Absolute pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Whew. Okay, I'm really excited for this conversation. There's a lot of deep stuff to get into, so we're going. Chaz and Kelsey, when we last spoke, this idea of community and kinship came up a lot, and I'm hoping you can talk about how you see agriculture informing our relationships with one another, with animals, with biodiversity, and with the land.
So I'm Chaz Daughtry at Sweetwater Farms HDX, and our goal is really to teach agriculture to really anybody, but our farm focuses on youth. So what we do on our 6-acre urban farm in Houston, Texas, we have youth come visit our farm. We have them come learn about agriculture so they can study. So growing up, I didn't really have any mentors for agriculture, but I wanted somebody to teach me. So now our goal is basically to teach kids, let them see, put their hands in the dirt, let them know they don't have to be a farmer, but they can be an agri-tech person, they can be in STEM, they can be in ag nutrition, and just really get their hands dirty and see the agriculture field.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Kelsey.
Absolutely. Ampeti washte. That means good day, everybody. Tatea akwalawi lakotia imachi abi. My name is Kelsey Scott. Lakota name is Soft Little Breeze Woman. I'm a citizen of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, located in present-day north central South Dakota. It is an absolute honor to be here today to be able to introduce myself in my Lakota language. I bet that's probably a first at a South by event.
Not actually,
no?
But
Okay,
we're glad
good.
You're here. Please
you had
going.
Lakotas here before, so you know we can kind of get a little unruly. Sorry about that. No. It's truly an honor to be here and to be centered around this conversation of kinship. This is a setting where you feel that there is a celebration of kinship in all that we do, and so I got to give my hats off to those who have orchestrated this phenomenal movement, and thank you to everybody who's a part of it. I think for me, what kinship helps farmers and ranchers do, helps people within the food systems advocacy space do, is appreciate that we are a point in time of this massive continuum. And you're empowered to understand what is your kinship and your relationship with what came before you. How do you leverage that with your own unique skill set and expertise on this land that you get to steward, that you've inherited from some sort of ancestral base? And what's the vision that you can project forward for those to come after? Kinship is all about helping to contextualize that and remind us that we aren't doing this alone. If we do, that silo can be very lonely.
Right.
And we need to be able to really appreciate the relationships that we choose to have with one another.
Absolutely. Those relationships are everything. And Josh, that brings me to you. You and I and so many others in this room see farmers as the backbone of rural America. And I'm hoping you can talk about, how kinship plays into that, those relationships that are needed so that farmers in rural America are supported, because so often they are not.
Yeah, and I'm Josh Tranel here from Vera Corner, Southwest Wisconsin. Farmers are the backbone of all these rural communities across the nation. And as the farmers succeed, the communities succeed. And as the farmers struggle, the communities struggle. I've seen that play out in our community, in communities across Wisconsin, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio, Illinois. Further you go west and east, it's the same story. Barns turn off in lights turn off in the barns, or farms struggle and go out of business. They get gobbled up by bigger and bigger corporations or bigger and bigger farms. And the community dies. I mean, when that dairy family leaves the community, the grocery store shuts down. The school board doesn't have members to run anymore. All these pieces of community that are so interconnected really depend on farmers succeeding and farmers thriving in this country. And if we want a robust food system in this country, we need farmers to succeed, and we need farmers to succeed from coast to coast, north to south, because that's what keeps our communities alive, and that's what keeps the communities moving forward, and that's how we get a food system that's sustainable.
Absolutely, thank you for that. Michelle, Josh has been talking about, we need farmers to succeed, but there are real challenges right now happening at the federal level, and farmers are facing more challenges probably than ever before in the last couple of weeks. Can you talk about how this is impacting the young farmers that you work so closely with?
Sure, yeah. So I will tell you a little bit about the National Young Farmers Coalition. We're a grassroots advocacy organization. We work to mobilize, shift power, and advance equitable policy for the next generation of working farmers. So what that means is I have a lot of boring policy meetings every day. I will say that farming is challenging. I'm a former hog farmer myself. I left for a number of reasons that farmers still face today. I think that the number one challenge we're facing right now, certainly if anyone is watching the news, are the cuts to federal funding for USDA programming that goes directly to farmers and nonprofit organizations that service communities of farmers. So my organization hosts a survey alongside the Census of Agriculture every 5 years. The last survey report we released came out in 2022. 87% of respondents to that survey, which there are about 10,000 young farmers who took our survey, 87% of them identify their practices as regenerative, and another 97% identify their practices as sustainable. And so right now, USDA programs, specifically under the conservation title, are being cut significantly. Young Farmers as an organization are collecting stories on behalf of farmers and farming communities, and we are seeing that in our community alone, a loss of $5.5 million about installed payments and another $850,000. And the $5.5 million is already approved payments that are supposed to go out, and another $850,000 pending reimbursements that have been stalled. So what that means is farmers are furloughing staff. Some of them are on my board, some of them are chapter members, some of them are in our fellowship. They are stalling their operations processes, furloughing staff, in some cases laying them off, thinking about closing farms. The Environmental Quality Incentives Program specifically is conservation support directly to farmers, which has been under attack for the past 2 months. So we are trying to help farmers through that process, but it is quite difficult to keep up with the number of contracts that are being terminated, especially when there's not transparency around exactly which are being terminated. We have to find that out ourselves. So farming is already challenging, and this is a new nuance for us that we're trying to tackle.
It's so confusing right now. And Chaz, I'm hoping you can comment on this as well. As a young farmer, as a young advocate, there's a particular set of challenges that Black and brown folks are facing in this environment right now. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, I can. So a lot of Black and brown people, our farms are started from funding. We don't have things just passed down from generation to generation. And so to start a new farm costs thousands and thousands of dollars. And so the funding that comes from the federal government actually really helps us out and actually really helps us start a farm. And so I'm on a few farm boards myself, and right now that money was actually promised from last year. We did the work last year, and now it's at a stall point right now. Yeah. And so we're actually having to lay off staff as well, and we can't continue to educate the consumers and the buyers. And so that means that we can't grow more food, we can't educate more people. So it's really just a tough place to be a farmer, which is already hard. You're already facing weather challenges, you're already facing, climate change, you're already facing just low sales sometimes. The market's up and down. People don't really have money sometimes to buy good and organic produce, which is what we try to do, is actually sell good and organic produce at a low cost, but it's sometimes still not affordable. And so with those grants helps us bring the cost down so we can be able to pay our staff and also have lower prices. Yeah. And so right now people are just really at a deficit right now in the farming industry who depend on those grants.
So much uncertainty. And Kelsey, I'm hoping you can comment on this as well. This is happening in our tribal communities and among indigenous folks. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I would be glad to. I think the biggest thing I would offer, though, is a call to action. Yesterday and today, every conversation I hear USDA is cutting. And I think we need to make sure we give credit where credit's due anywhere in the food and ag industry, and make sure that we understand where the cuts are being generated from and how the cuts are impacting farmers and ranchers. So like Ms. Washington said, don't just go visit a farm, ask them what it means if USDA is not available to them. If you're talking to a tribal producer, ask them what it means if USDA and BIA offices are not available to them, because that's what we're preparing for in our technical service efforts as an organization. These are not just supports for risk mitigation and diversification of market access and succession planning tools. These are actual, in Indian country, they're approval authorities. We have to still seek Bureau of Indian Affairs approval before we can engage in a conservation practice on our lands. And so when we talk about eliminating the offices that may provide approval authorities, we come into this space of this just can't be something that farmers and ranchers are calling and talking to their local decision makers about. We need consumers to help us to inform this outcome, to make sure that we continue to be able to be farmers and ranchers that are producing for this food system.
Yeah, I mean, I think now, this particular moment in time, it means we all have to come together. It's not just, we can't keep siloing ourselves. Josh, if I can turn to you, Paul Willis talked earlier about aging farmers in the United States, and the average age is around 60. What is this doing to farmland in rural communities like the one you live? When farmers age out, you sell their farms or don't have anyone to succeed them?
Yeah, and I think it just got mentioned earlier too. We are on the cusp of a generational land transfer in this country. I mean, a lot of these farms got purchased in the 80s through that farm crisis. Those families are aging out, selling off, the kids are taking over the farm. The kids don't really have a tie back to agriculture because of all the struggle that their family experienced. So how this next 10 years goes is how the next 40 years are gonna go. And it's scary, but it's also exciting. The amount of young farmers that are coming into agriculture because they believe in an organic system and they believe of knowing how their food is grown and they believe in good, clean food is exciting. But it's also scary because for those farms to transfer, they need capital. They need to be able to shed off outside investors. It's remarkable the amount of times a farm can transition from somebody like Paul to somebody else. I just talked to him before. His current renter is an organic farmer, where a lot of times, if there's not that connection made, it just goes to the kids and then it gets sold off as real estate for another city to come out and fight it. And that's another big pressure that farmers are facing. So we talk about all these federal support programs like NRCS. There's a lot of things the government can do to help us, and they need to be accessible through the FSA for this generational land transfer to happen. But the exciting thing is there's farmers out there willing and able to take over these farms, and that's something we really pride ourselves on at Organic Valley is getting these farms transitioned to the next generation, getting new farms started up. Now our co-op started 44 new farms last year, which is tremendous because nobody else in the dairy industry is doing that.
That's amazing.
And that's really kind of why I joined the board of directors at Organic Valley. I came into this as a time I was 27, 28. Our co-op was really struggling. The farmers my age were really struggling. We didn't have a voice at the cooperative. And we were all kind of scared of what the future is. But now, just seeing what's happening across America the last couple of years, this clean food movement picking back up, getting steam, people wanting to know where their food's coming from, and people really buying into the fact that good, clean, whole organic food is really the best path forward, that's brought a bright spot to us. And I think it's a good tailwind we can take into this next generation and really get these farms transferred to the next generation and to someone that wants to take them over and do things appropriately.
Thank you for that. I love how you sort of frame this as it's exciting, but it's also scary, but there's so much opportunity there if we can all realize that it needs to be grabbed onto. Michelle, sorry, I'm gonna get emotional about this because the last time we spoke, we talked about 3 farmers that are part of the coalition that you lost because of they tragically died by suicide. And there are real mental health challenges now that farmers all over this country are facing, and it's getting worse because of some of the changes we already discussed. And first, I want to say how sorry I am for you and the coalition.
Thank you.
But I'm wondering how you can talk about this in a way that all of us can figure out a way to be helpful so that farmers realize that they are supported.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you for saying that, first of all. And I just want to point out that farmer mental health is a gigantic problem in the U.S. Poor farmer mental health is widespread across the U.S. There's $10 million dedicated to a program in the Farm Bill to combat poor mental health for farmers. So it is not unique to my community or our coalition to lose farmers because of financial distress. And the thing that I think we can offer farmers is, one, community, two, value. Farmers have so much value. They are invisible people that make up so many communities and are many parts of the vertebrae that make up the backbone of our national food supply. I think the media will have you think that most of your food comes from like very large farms, which is generally not the case. If you take a look at the actual people that produce our food, it is mostly small family farms. And with people leaving agriculture consistently and so many people wanting to get into agriculture who don't have the capital or who are stuck and are not able to break even or make any profit off of their farm, that is rough. There have been a slew of recommendations I've heard of people speaking earlier today about making choices with your fork. I think you can also advocate for farmers even though you are not a farmer. Even if you feel disconnected from farming communities, you can serve as an advocate. Your congresspeople are required to listen to you as a resident of a population of people that they represent, whether you are in farming or not. You don't have to be very well educated to talk to a congressperson about farming. All you have to do is make your voice heard. And so I think that is one thing for sure that you can do, is harness your political power, even if right now it doesn't feel like you have any. That is not true. It's just what everyone wants you to think is true.
Thank you. Of course, please. And then you. Kelsey, please, go ahead. Thank you, Michelle.
I'm going to put on my rancher hat for just a minute and share a brief story. We have a direct-to-consumer grass-fed beef business, and one of the proudest days of my life as a rancher was getting to deliver a bundle of locally raised, grass-fed, premium quality beef to a house that didn't have windows in the middle of South Dakota, right? So farmers and ranchers can carry such an immense pride. It's not I put up that cross fence, or this was our bottom line this year. Those things help, and they make it cash flow so you can stay in the business. But that was one of the most raw times I felt kinship in the food system I was working to create. A family whose house didn't have windows was able to access my meat because I made sure to get EBT SNAP certified, and I made sure that I had built a business plan where I could deliver to the doorstep of families who deserved access to high quality meats. And so I think that this conversation about kinship can be a much larger than just like how we're feeding our families at home. I feel like majority of us here have probably the good fortune of not worrying about where our next meal is, and that is not the case for the majority, or for many consumers that surround our home areas. And so finding ways that we can help those families by empowering the ranchers, the farmers themselves, with a celebration of what they bring to the table really creates that deep, deep appreciation, and it helps inspire that resilience that was referred to earlier. And at the same time, we have to question the paradigm ranchers are navigating. Why is it that their bottom lines are so tight? A lot of times it comes back to the access to credit and the financial systems that really have a short hold on our farmers and ranchers.
Yeah, they're facing a lot. Josh?
Yeah, farmer mental health, I think, is one of the most dynamic conversations this country can have, because just the way farmers are, I mean, one, we're a resilient bunch, and two, we're a lonely bunch. I mean, a lot of people went into farming because, let's face it, they like livestock more than they like people. And that's great until you pile on all these stresses of not cash flowing, not making money, of equip money disappearing, of you spending $1 million and all of a sudden you're not having the funding from the government to pile up. But the harder piece for me is that you hear all this talk from Washington, from all the state governments about we want to support farmer mental health. But as farmers, you say, well, that doesn't happen to me. That can't happen in this community. And then it hits home. And then you have a friend that commits suicide, or you have things that happen tragically. But I really think the best way we can all go about it is stop the attack on farmers and stop the attack on the way food was grown. We need to have conversations about it versus attacking it. And I don't know how many of you, like when you see farmers or you go to the grocery stores, just thank people in your community that grow food. I mean, the impact that can have is tremendous, because you don't know what someone's going through, and you don't know if Chaz is at the farmer's market. You don't know the blood, sweat, and tears he put into that, and you don't know the bills he's got to pay and what he's thinking about getting done at home the next day. He's there trying to be in the moment, trying to sell you a product that he knows is good for you and he poured his heart and soul into. But just taking the time to say, oh, thank you for doing this for me, is, I think, the best thing we can all do.
Kindness goes a long way. Do you want to comment on any of that, Chaz?
Yes, this is actually one of the first time I've heard anybody talk about farmers' mental health. I mean, just dealing with it myself, you can be growing the best thing all year, and then you have a snowstorm or ice storm, or you have last year in Houston we had a tornado, then we had a hurricane, and it pretty much wiped us out 2 times in less than 2 months. And so, you know, it just can be really stressful when you're growing stuff. But I get satisfaction out of when people come to the market and they come by from me and they say, hey, my kid's doing better. They're eating well. They're loving the veggies. So it can be really stressful. And sometimes it's kind of like you have to be a little crazy to do it sometimes because
A lot
you
crazy.
can lose it in one day. You know, you put a whole effort. You plant it. You buy the seeds. You do this. You plant. You harvest. You do everything right. And then next thing you know, one storm comes in. Mother Nature wipes everything out. And you have to be mentally prepared. You know, when I started gardening, farming, it was really just to be a small gardener and then teach youth. And then, you know, the more you grow, the bigger you get, the less it's it's more stress on it. So this is the first time I've heard farmers' mental health really be talked about, and I'm really appreciative to just let people know about it as well.
I'm so appreciative of it as well. Thank you so much. One of the things that bothers me as an advocate and as a communicator is that farmers are often blamed for a lot of things, like environmental challenges like the climate crisis, or, you know, they're not growing the right things. How do we switch this paradigm? You're all young farmers and ranchers who are trying to do the very best. How do we switch from, how do we help consumers switch from, you know, blaming farmers to really appreciating them like we've talked about before? Josh?
I mean, the number one thing you can do is vote with your dollars. I mean, I don't know how many times that's been said today, but buying those CSA boxes from farmers who you know are doing good, or committing with brands and cooperatives that you know are doing good and doing good in this world. Animal-based agriculture and organic agriculture can be the biggest force for good in this world and the biggest way we can fight climate change. I don't know how many times farmers get blamed for all this, I mean, cow farts and all these things going on, where we take the blame for what's going on. But good food, clean food, organic food done right can be the biggest way we can all make a difference for climate change across this country. And that comes down to grass-based agriculture systems, that comes down to local food being grown and being sold within its radius. There is so many ways we can go about doing it, but it's got to start with the farmer and it's got to end with the consumer.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Michelle?
I mean, generally speaking, I have a background in agricultural economics, so if you look at how much money actually ends up at the farmer from what you purchase in the grocery store, I don't know how easy it would be for you to blame farmers after you see something like that.
Sure.
So I'll just start with that. But I will say, and I am a former livestock farmer, and so share some of the perspective that has already been said, but I think that land stewardship is very underrated as an agricultural, climate change mitigation practice. I think that if you look actually at like the industries that are creating the climate change impacts that we're trying to mitigate, I wouldn't put agriculture in number one. I'm not going to, villainize any other industry, but I would just say that I don't see farmers as like the top of that. In fact, I would ask you to change your perspective and think about farmers actually being on the front lines of climate change and being the people that can actually mitigate the impacts of climate change in a way that maybe other industries that you can point a finger at are not or are unwilling to. So in my coalition, 80% of the farmers that are in our coalition say that they started because they care about environmental conservation. It is the reason that they farm. And so I can't look at those 200,000 so community of young farmers that we service and try to villainize them when the reason that they're coming into farming is for the environment.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Kelsey?
Yeah, I think I'm going to bring us back to that concept of a continuum. I think that there's oftentimes history, even within ecosystems, that repeats itself. We fall into exploitative practices around what does this word mean or that word mean as it relates to a production practice. And we have to remember as we look into the identity, the history, the knowledge, the identity that this land carries, as far back as we can conceive, there was a steward of that ecosystem. There was human beings. And we are the descendants of these human beings that stewarded these ecosystems over and over and over. And so we have to, one, I think, learn more about where does that history lead to in the lands that we get to be a part of, whether it's lands that we're inhabiting within a city base that's, mainly consumer driven, has access to a Whole Foods. I'm really jealous. I wish we did at home. But beyond that, we should consider how we uplift and we appreciate that culturally relevant way within which we can uplift farmers to support in being the front lines, the most knowledgeable to take care of that land base remaining within our population base. Help empower them, give them the tools, give them access to the tools they know they need, make it available for them, and we all can play a meaningful part in that.
Absolutely. Thank you for all of that. Give her a round of applause. Chaz, my friend, you get the final word.
I think about starting young with the youth, just showing them that the farmer is just as important as the doctor, lawyer, the nurse that's in the office. I think we noticed during COVID that the farmers are just as important as the nurses and the doctors as well too, because people needed food and grocery stores ran out of stock. So if we start young, teaching them the importance of the farmer and what we can actually do, I think it will be a generational change and people will start respecting it as well. Amazing.
Thank you. That was great. Please give these panelists a round of applause. Thank you all so much. Thank you. A little change in schedule, y'all. So thank them again. Keep clapping.